One. Welcome to From the Research Chair, Episode 8. I'm Jason Voss.
And I am Michael Falk.
Today we have a very special topic, and it falls in the context of something we said on our very first podcast. That is, we are citizens first, financial professionals second. Said another way, we think of finance as serving the greater good, greater society in general. And today marks our first I wouldn't call it a deviation. I would call it a purpose-led conversation. We're going to be talking about Michael's excellent book, Get to Work on Our Future. Michael, any opening remarks, not about the book, but about being a citizen first?
I don't mind being referred to as a deviation. So Jason, if you want to go there for the topic today, I'm okay with it.
We are self-confessed deviants. If you know the Enneagram, which we use at Focus Consulting, both Michael and I represent minority categories in the Enneagram wheel. So we could be labeled that. And we have a fair reputation, I think, for being a little bit mad, well-deserved.
Yeah, but we can talk about finance for good real quick. Let's be honest, as much as people want to malign capitalism, there is no system that has lifted more people out of poverty and pushed the world forward for more people than capitalism. Now, that doesn't mean that capitalism doesn't need rules, doesn't need some better management, but capitalism is about finance, folks. We can't get away from it. So let's not try.
Yeah, agreed with that statement. And I think that democracy and capitalism are pretty good complements of one another. I think my favorite quote on capitalism is, it's the least dirty shirt we have. It's not perfect.
Paul Macaulay.
Yeah, it's not perfect, but it's also not hideous, right? So we can do better.
All right, well, if we're going there, Winston Churchill, my friend, we get the government we deserve. And I'm like, oh my God, what did we do?
Yeah, well, there is that. But in the line of how do we do this better? How do we do the bridge between capitalism, democracy, between the polity and the economic better? Michael wrote, Get to Work on Our Future. Michael, why'd you write this book?
Oh, geez. Well, I wrote two books. In 2011, I got really fed up and annoyed about something that was going on with the US government. It was called the debt ceiling. And it motivated me to write what about was an 8-page missive. I jokingly call it my entitlements manifesto. All right. Well, people like this thing. And, well, people liked it. Okay. I got asked to talk. Then I got invited to write a book. Oh my God. As a writer, I make a great speaker. This is like the face for radio topic. So next thing you know, in 2016, I wrote this book for the CFA Institute Research Foundation. And then, oh my God, did I give talks, dozens of lectures on that book, 13 different countries, including the US. All right. In all of the dialogues I had, the Q&As, people were so nice and they gave me feedback. What did they say to me? Michael, where are all the jobs going to come from? Ding, 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 ding. I missed the biggest entitlement of them all. It's called a job. So I'm like, oh no. Now I got to write another book because I missed that. And then, Jason, I wrote this, which is the topic of today. Does that answer your question?
No, it doesn't. That's sort of the technical aspects. Those are sort of the logistical details. We all have limited time on this planet. You didn't write it because people asked you a couple of thoughtful questions on your speech. You had a passion for it.
I had to. When I was 22, I figured out my purpose.
I was going to say, those of us who've written books know that they don't usually sell well. We do it because we have a passion
no, they don't.
We do it because we have a passion for it. Michael, what's the beating heart, your heart, at the center of this book?
When I was 22, I figured out my purpose. I want to positively impact the financial lives of as many people as possible. It took me 2 to 3 decades to operationalize that. And what did that look like? Okay, so I started in private wealth. I'm helping people one by one. I went into pension institutional money management. I'm helping thousands of people by thousands of people. The only way I go higher is to attempt to impact policy and to get and educate more people so it can expand my voice. My purpose came out in these books. These books are my purpose. And what is it about? In 2 words, opportunity equality.
Tell us more. I know it's divided into certain chapters. Each chapter has a big idea. Let's take them in sequence. And I know you. I know you pretty well. I think work pretty intimately with you. You sequence those things in order for a reason. Get us to the first big idea in the book.
I did. Well, to get opportunity equality and get to work on our future, we got to have a level playing field. And as much as I wanted to launch into this topic about work in lieu of a job, I knew I couldn't go right there. I had to talk about the rules of the game, which is governance. So the first chapter is about governance, and governance that talks about having more of a level playing field, which is about voting rights for people, which is about political office, how rules and legislation can be done. If we don't have that, how in the world, without that level playing field, can we start to build on that in terms of what's next? So once I tried to level the playing field, then I needed to take on this giant unknown entitlement. And I talked about work. Why do we work? It's about dignity. It's about self-esteem. It's about producing something bigger than us. And you know what? The gig economy that people malign, go talk to people who are involved in the gig economy. They're all purpose, with maybe a side dish of, I got to do administrative stuff too. All right. So it's all about purpose. So I see, and the gig economy is everywhere, right? Talent exists everywhere in some odd places. With the internet and technology, those newfangled things, we can leverage all that. So historically, corporations were a quote unquote organization of labor. But it was based upon some simple perspectives that I think are outdated. So let's expand the concept of work, what it is, how we define it, how people can do it, right? If we disaggregate healthcare from employment in the US, which was in my first book, then it gets easier. So
Michael, hold on. I'm going to interrupt you only for I'm representing our audience here, and all of that pretty high level, slightly mezzo level, if you will. That big idea of starting off equally. How do you propose we achieve that? And I know you have some specific thoughts there.
Well, now I got to go from the back of the book first, not the front of the book, Jason.
Okay, all right.
All right. So the back of the book, some people have labeled me anti-entitlement. No, we need safety nets and trampolines. How about we add one more piece of furniture to that? Nets, trampolines, and a platform. You know what that platform is? That platform is called Universal Basic Income, UBI, as generally talked about in the media. And people say, Michael, you got to be kidding me. You're against most entitlements and you think we should have UBI? Yes, I do. Because you know what? And I designed it in the book pertaining to US, but can be stolen for any other country to a large extent. The bottom line is raise people up on a platform. And so when they're not hungry, right? And they can keep the electricity on and they can have some basics of life, you know what? Then that's a platform to launch from. Then we have nets and trampolines if they need them. But what I've come to terms with is we need a platform if we want to attempt opportunity equality.
If I may add there, I have been privileged to know some true blue blood royalty folks in my career. Finance, we enter these orbits every once in a while that most of us don't have access to. I never did before entering finance. And the nature of what questions they concern themselves with, and at a very young age, is radically different because they have zero anxiety about their next meal, about the roof over their head. I've been in conversations with kids who are like 15, 16, and they are literally, not exaggerating, plotting how to form a major corporation, how quickly they can become a billionaire, what route they're going to take to do it, how they're going to access their dad or their mom's or their family's angel investor network to make it happen. Kids who grow up poor, and I grew up relatively poor myself, we just don't think that way. We think,
No.
I love music. I used to skip lunches with my $1.40 each day of lunch money for an entire week because that was bus fare downtown Denver to buy a cassette tape and back. And so I didn't eat. And that was the choice that I made economically because I liked the music more than I liked the terrible school lunch. The wealthy just don't think this way. So UBI, it's not just about the dignity aspect. It changes mindsets. People think forward. They think bigger if they have it in place.
It's it's huge. When I talk about a platform, I can simplify and say, I'm going to skip Maslow's bottom rung. I'm going to put the platform right above Maslow's bottom rung. And then let's see what people can develop in. What I learned in my research for both books, and quite frankly disgusted me, if by the age of 6, roughly, children aren't raised with access to food and nutrition consistently, access to good schools, and a stable household, it affects their brain growth that they cannot regain in later years. So Jason, you made that choice to spend your lunch money on something else, but you were older than 6. So my point is, if we can enable children by the age of 6 to have these 3 things, and yeah, a little extra cash will do that.
So you're thorough. How do we pay How do we pay for this? I know that's inevitably going to be a question. I know you've thought about that.
We don't have enough time, but it is I actually did pay for it, believe it or not. So here's the point. I didn't launch in. I've been ruminating on the merits of UBI for about 4 or 5 years because I was on the fence. I was undecided. And as I started to get into writing on these topics, I analyzed all the alternatives, and there is no better alternative. It's kind of like democracy and capitalism. All right, no. All right, let's move away from that for a moment. All right. So in that last chapter in the book, I went through the proximate alternatives and analyzed them quickly, and then landed on UBI, and then I priced it out. How you design it matters for the price. When we say universal, how are you defining that? Is that all people, or is that all adults? Does it include all kids? What about retirees? When you talk about income, well, what income makes sense? How much should we give to people? You know, in the US, we have a quote unquote poverty level. It's BS, folks. There is no poverty level. It's a chasm that has width, and people come in and out and above and below. So let's just use it for reference point. I want to give people enough money per month, certain people, which is most adults, that is a little bit below the poverty level, because I want them to work. They can do something, right? And then they are going to be way above the poverty level if they just do some average work at average pay, because they don't lose that. I want it to be an incentive to push higher, but make sure they're not hungry. They can keep the heat on. They can keep the electricity on. I ended up with $800 a month instead of $1,000. And then through a change in other benefits, all the benefits that cost out for potential poverty, that's a big number, and other issues. I didn't tax the way people imagine, oh my God, you're going to tax us to death, those with money. I didn't have to do it. The amazing thing was it is so low cost and can energize an economy so much. Let me give you an example. Single parent raising a child. Oh my God, how do they work? if the child is young. With the additional money, they can work. We're talking about aggregating up income. There is so much that comes from this. And yeah, it can be paid for. Even in the US, that is so capitalistic and private about its capitalism, we can do it. So think of other countries that are a little bit more caring about society. Won't be an issue, in my opinion.
So Michael, next big idea, universal basic income, check. And by the way, as always, as a reminder, if you have questions, throw those into the chat box on the side and we will endeavor to get to them. Several of you, including Richard and Gordon, have already made some comments. Thank you so much for that. Michael, next big idea, what is it?
Oh, the robots are coming, the robots are coming, the robots are coming. Yeah, so what? All right, the amount of thought that is given and the press and the ink that is spilled on robots taking all of our jobs and AI changing. Yeah, robots and AI are going to change society, but I'm sorry, we don't have a scarcity of jobs, folks. Right? Let's just use an example. Let's say total employment is roughly 65%. I wish it were higher, but let's call it 65% of society. Well, since societies are bigger now than 100 years ago, fertility and all, that means that we've produced more jobs. So the number of jobs isn't fixed. Oh my God. So now, if the number of jobs isn't fixed, yeah, robots are going to do some jobs better. Robots are going to assist some jobs better. AI is going to create new jobs. It's going to take care of some jobs. We're not going to get rid of the need of people to work. It's not going to happen. In the chapter before UBI, I wanted to dispel the myth that AI and robots are going to take all our jobs. And I explained why. And I cited the insanity in some of the research, because different researchers have estimated the number of jobs that are going to be lost because of automation. Let's call it generally automation. And the estimates are anywhere from 30 to 60%. Really? That's the range of estimates? So why don't we just say we have no idea, but we think it's going to be a significant number. Fine. If people have an attitude of stressing what they are innately good at or could be good at and do better work, the robots won't be a threat. It'll be a complement. It'll leverage us up. Let me give you an example. Can I give you an example?
No. Okay.
All right, fine. I will never be able to travel again. So because I can't travel again, that means I have to work from home from now on. Not because of COVID, folks. So the ability to do this with you, Jason, with our guests, Zoom technology, microphones, speakers, technology, all technology we can argue is robot to some extent. This is allowing me to work for longer in something that I care about. So, folks, it's not going to steal our jobs. It's going to push us into better jobs for us.
So, I have some comments there. Michael knows my background. Some of you on the call may know or on our podcast today may know my background. I have spent time on a board for an AI firm. I have also researched it at CFA Institute because it was a hot topic during my tenure.
So you're the problem?
I'm saying, say again?
Are you the problem?
I could be the problem. Yeah, contraindicator. That would go. Now we're going full circle. Now I'm qualifying, improving my deviant chops that we discussed at the top of the call. It is in the firm that I served as a board member on. Let's be clear, folks. This is a level of AI that even Silicon Valley doesn't have. The firm, its sole client was the U.S. intelligence community, starting in the early 80s.
Is that an oxymoron?
It is not. Those are sophisticated folks with
Okay,
sophisticated needs. And they think that the AI story is so overwrought, and if the story is coming out of the mouths of Silicon Valley and some of the other major research centers, Michael, you and I know that it's a highly sophisticated algorithm of algorithms basically that are operating, And there are so many problems with it, it's even difficult to know where to begin. But the first one is that it struggles with the most basic of human activities like context. And the better AI researchers will admit that. So there's a line from one of the folks at AlphaGo, which was the team of AI and machine learning researchers who famously beat the Go champion. Go is a
From
game, for
Google.
those of you who don't know. And they, that researcher, one of the lead researchers said, yeah, it beat this guy at Go, but it can't open a car door. And the point being that it's a whole nother application that would have to be developed just to be able to do rudimentary human functioning. Said another way, humans have radically sophisticated dynamic intelligence of a general kind that escapes the capability of most machines and probably always will, to be perfectly frank. And once you accept that, then to Michael's point, it becomes about where is this number crunching in a sophisticated way of great use, and how can it aid people, not replace people? Or if it replaces people, let's free them up to do something that isn't rote, because the AI that is there tends to be closed context and rote. So that's the first thing, is context is key. And my favorite story, and then I'll turn it back over to Michael, since this is his hour.
No, I'm sharing.
Yeah, no, I know, but it really is about your high quality book, my friend. I know, as uncomfortable as you are with the spotlight, it's on you nonetheless.
Well, no,
So,
that's just a desk lamp.
my favorite story about AlphaGo is if you actually read the paper, and this is something that separates Michael and I from a lot of our peers. We actually read the scientific papers. If you actually read the paper where they talk about how AlphaGo did what it did, my favorite little detail is that they first looked at Go champion games and they programmed them into an algorithm, and they literally asked human beings to volunteer. I think it was like 10 million actual Go games. It then was used, the algorithm, to evaluate winning strategies. They then cleaved it into Alpha A, or AlphaGo 1, AlphaGo 2, and they had the computer play itself to get even better. But guess what? It kept playing the same game over and over and over again. And it wasn't sophisticated, it wasn't dynamic, and it couldn't handle anything unpredictable. So the way that they got AlphaGo to become better is they put a random number generator in it, a random path generator in it, and they started having one of the two players start doing random moves so that there was adaptation. Oh my God. That story is not widely promulgated, but what it tells you is that this idea that machines, because IQ is important to us and intelligence and logic are important to us, and because computers can do it so much faster, that necessarily makes them better, is such a fib. Folks, it's our adaptability that makes us exceptional. We're the ones who invented the computer.
Jason, boy, you just triggered a thought. We do this to each other all the time. Before they inserted the random number generator, you know what you just described? If we were to change the frame of context, if we were in the medical world, in the neuroscience world, what you just described was autism.
That's exactly right. It basically gets stuck at a one-way cul-de-sac playing the same game over and over and over
Because
again.
it was comfortable doing so. So in my book, pages 67 to 70, I laid out the 5 inescapable problems for AI to take over the world. And why did I do so? All right, AI simply defined is 2 things. It's just 2 things. This is the beautiful thing. It's incredibly large amounts of data. People call this big data, and really, really fast computing power with various stochastics and regression techniques. So let's just call it data dependent. All right, well, where are you getting your data from? Who owns the data? How durable is the data? How sustainable is the data? So I'm going to utter the 4 most dangerous words in finance now. This time is different. Okay, so you may hate me for saying that or not. I don't care. You have to decide, to what extent do you think this time is different? So let's say you admit, the first step, you know, is to admit. All right, so let's say you admit it is different to some extent this time. All right, so then what you just said is all of the historical data that is gathered is irrelevant. or at most tangential. Be very, very careful with this topic, folks. What data, whose data, how much of it you have access to, how often. Regime change will be hell on AI.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to miss almost every state change. Two final comments, and we'll switch to the next big idea in your book, Michael. The reason why Watson, IBM's much ballyhooed technology, AI technology, has not found a cure for cancer is because there hasn't been a cure for cancer for it to assess. So there's no data to feed into it. It cannot do what human beings do, which is consider radical new concepts and new ideas and new techniques. Said another way, computers remain uncreative. And last point, the biggest point about AI for me is, if we're going to dismiss human intelligence so quickly, let's at least understand what we're rejecting first. And I would argue that there should be as much delving into in and amongst the Silicon Valley research crowd into how to maximize human intelligence first before we reject it. And every time I talk to one of these guys in Silicon Valley, they start, and they're mostly guys. I have yet to have a conversation with an AI woman other than one at a hedge fund. And they don't understand human intelligence. They don't understand
Wait,
how their own
hold on.
minds
Did you
work.
just say a woman in a hedge fund? I think you're lying.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Well, now there's a dangerous topic. No.
A very dangerous topic, but in any case, before we reject human intelligence, let's understand it first. And human intelligence is so spectacular and so different than anything else that we can even begin to look at. Before we reject it, let's understand it. Michael, what's the next big idea in Get to Work on Our Future?
Well, you think about our concern within the economy and within finance of what seems like winner take all, right? The giant tech companies taking all the share and being the only businesses that are really sustainable. And, you know, it's kind of interesting. We have winner take all in our governance. We have winner take all in our governance? Well, if we don't want it for society, why in the world would we want it for our governance? How we do voting? Let's just say, all right, we know for a fact that different people in society have different goals and motivations when you're younger or when you're older. It's all good. It's all good. Hopefully we're all younger and older at some point in our lives. So we're allowed to have this. But when we don't vote in such a way to satisfy the plurality of society, what if I divided 3 age groups, young and up and comers, let's say to age 35, and the ages, we could debate the ages, all right? 35 to 70 working age, and then 70 plus. And we can fuss with the ages. I'm not overly worried about the exact ages. What if to win an election, you have to win the vote majority of each of the age demographics, each of the age cohorts? Something as simple as that. I ask all these questions in the book, right? Because young people want very different things than older people. Working age people want very different things. What if you've got to win 2 out of 3 of those age cohorts, or you don't get elected? You think we might have a better aligned society? Oh yeah. There's so many issues and topics within how we elect and the methods that have room for improvement to expand alignment and plurality, and we're not doing it. We are pursuing ever more divisive methods. And in some cases, we can think of autocracies where that is very purposeful. And in other cases where it's just historical. Take the Electoral College in the US, which, you know, is pretty historical. Oh my God. You know why the Electoral College was created? Because all the states in the US, they weren't confident enough that the people were intelligent enough to make good decisions. So they created Electoral College to have representation that can vote differently than its people for the president of the United States. Oh, So we're basically saying it was created when we thought people were too ignorant to make good decisions. Now, whether or not you still hold that opinion, let's not go there. But can we at least flunk the Electoral College at this point? Stoddy, one of our guests, chatted in referendum. Yeah, yeah. There's all sorts of ways we can do ranked choice voting in lieu of binary yes, no. Yes, let people express preferences. Jason, it may seem, oh, I hope, that I'm not all over the place in what I put in this book. There are little links to everything. Unfortunately, I couldn't stick to policies. I had to write that governance chapter because if we don't level the playing field, none of this can happen.
Well, the two are related. It's only because of our modern predilection at massive expertise development and specialization that we consider these as unrelated. We're talking about the environments in which we operate. Um, for what it's worth, and it's not in your book, Michael, but some of you on the conference call or on our podcast, I keep calling it conference call. Michael and I spend inordinate amounts of time on conference calls, as I'm sure all of you do too. On our podcast, some of you may be aware that I co-founded a think tank called the Sarasota Institute. We covered this topic earlier this year and a couple of years ago, actually, in a white paper called The Big Ideas. And on the democracy front, we postulated the following. We love ranked choice voting. And we're not advocating necessarily for one of these. This is just, let's get a conversation started on governance. How about none of the above? All votes only record affirmative votes. You can't vote no on anything. And so imagine if the no votes actually had plurality. So you go to the polls and you say, I don't like any of these candidates. I don't like any of these issues. And that held sway. The obvious objection to that idea is, well, geez, Jason, won't the government shut down if we don't have a president? Well, we've had numerous government shutdowns, at least in recent US history. And dare I say it, other than a national park closed when a family arrives in their family truckster to go explore the national park, they haven't really noticed. And what you would do is you'd have an immediate re-election, and you might do a runoff election where you have the two that got the least amount of no votes. That is, they get the most yes votes. No could still win the day. And what it would force is people actually running for an idea, for a set of ideas, not against the other person, because you could still vote no. As it is now, we do choose the least dirty shirt. So that's the first one. The next one is, to Michael's point, ranked choice voting. Say you had 10 points to allocate to individual candidates. Probably Hillary Clinton, going back to 2016, would have been elected because if the undecideds got to say, hey, I get to allocate 6 points to her, 4 points to Trump, or 1 point to a Green Party, or 2 points to a Libertarian candidate, we would have been able to see what the undecideds really thought, but we basically forced them into one pathway or another.
So what you're saying is binary is bad.
I think so, my friend. I think
So
so.
this is what I want to touch on, and I don't want to be facetious about this. These topics that we're discussing, the topics in my book, the topics that we're expanding through dialogue, are all society topics. They are not just finance. Jason, to emphasize, we are citizens first before investment professionals. I can link it all. You can link it all. Most of us can link all of this to finance, but it is so much bigger. How about that?
Totally agree. So final idea I'll share and is get rid of the elected vice president. Most people think the elected vice president is a part of the Constitution of the United States. It's not. It used to be that they could be appointed. My contention, except for this election, because I have for 30 years been not a Donald Trump fan. This predates his entrance into politics. We used to use him as an example of who not to do business with when I was a fund manager. Not a fan. Sans this year, and sans crazy, our concept had been the loser of the election becomes the vice president automatically. And therefore, the government, as it's formed, always has the losing voice included in the cabinet. And it's my belief, it was the think tank's belief, that that would force additional discussion about what we're for rather than we're against anybody else. Now you have to win the vote based on how you're different than who is inevitably going to be right there with you governing. It also makes sure there's a plurality of ideas represented. Not
And
sure
you know
how it
what?
would work in 2020 though.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah.
Well, yes, but oh, let's just take a moment on, no, we can't. We can't. Uh,
Michael,
the
what's your
point,
next big idea?
well, how do I top that? No, here, let's come back to what is the core and central thought I have through both of my books, equality of opportunity. And here's the big idea, right? Whether it's Jason's, mine, anybody's, it matters not. Folks, we're spitballing ideas because we can, because it's safe to share ideas. It's safe to disagree with us because we want to examine things before we get emotional. Maybe that last one I had was a tad bit emotional about the loser being the vice president. But all right, let's move past that. Um, Here's the point. My books are about ideas. You may or may not like them. You may want to expand. You may want to alter, a little nip here, a little tuck there. Listen, I wrote the books not because I can change the world, I can change policy. I wrote the books to initiate a proper dialogue. I wanted to talk about reality and facts and ideas that may be a little bit unconventional that people then can talk about. I want people to have better dialogues about these topics that are so important to all of us. All of us. And for our international friends, if the US messes up, it does affect you, not just US citizens. We're on one blue dot, folks, and we are all in this together. You can talk about to what extent, but we are all in this together. And I want more and more people to be armed with more data, more creativity, more ideas, to have more conversations. Because I alone, I can't do anything. Intentions do not always equal impact was one of our bullet points about this. My intention is to positively impact as many people as possible. The impact of my books, but you can take my books. You can be my voice. You can share the books. Fine. First book, I get no royalties on. Folks, I do not have a conflict of interest. Second book, I'm giving my proceeds to the local ALS Foundation. This is not about me making money. This is about me trying to help the world be a little bit better. And I need all of you to read my little books, process, change, steal. I don't care. I need you to be my voice, because in a year or so, I'm not going to have a voice, literally. So I need people to take these ideas, blow them up, and then maybe together, our intention will have an impact.
Michael, that seems a good place to wrap it up. But question for you, what do you wish that you've been doing multiple interviews on your works? This one is featuring at the center of some of those interviews. What question haven't you been asked yet that you're just dying to answer? And then answer it, of course.
Wow. Why? Why did you do that to me?
Because
Jason, you're a friend. My God. Uh, people have asked me wonderful questions. They really have. People have been so tremendous in my interviews. And I guess, why did I think I had any snowball's chance in hell of nudging or pushing the world forward? I've had people ask that question, and I want to repeat it because it's probably the proper question. Michael, why do you think any of these good ideas will ever actually see the light of day? And my response to them and my response now is, I don't think they will. I don't think these ideas, good, bad, or indifferent, are going to see very much light of the day. And because it takes everybody. This has to be grassroots. Folks, if you don't understand that elected officials' sole job is to stay in office, then you're a fool. So the only way that we can have change is for elected officials to actually feel comfortable enough to push forth a different or a unique agenda. And the only way that's going to happen is their constituents share a voice. If we don't get grassroots bubbling up on these really important topics, no change is going to happen. At this point, Jason, let's unmute anybody who's here. And if they want to ask a question, let's dare say they can.
Before you do that, we can certainly do that. But there have been a couple of questions in the chat section, which I'm going to ask you in any case. Folks, do feel free to go off mute if you'd like to. Gordon had asked, since you have a two-party system, he's Canadian, fortunately at this moment, how about if the vice president were appointed by the losing party after the election? Michael.
I like that better than automatically the loser. I mean, they may put the loser in, but Gordon, thank you. I like that little creative twist. Jason, this is the point. Get a bunch of smart, creative people together and have proper dialogue about these topics. And you know what? We create new and better stuff.
Gordon, you asked the question. I did not, in the interest of time, express the whole idea of the loser becomes the vice president. One of the safety features built into the US system is the primary system. And so it also then would make the primary system paid attention to by more citizenry. And that was one of the reasons for putting that idea forward. It's not as radical as it sounds. The candidate for a major political party is very vetted. In fact, more vetted in the primary system than they are in the national election system. And it's a way of honoring all of that work. It's a way of shining a light on get involved as a citizen on the primary as well. So I'm going to disagree with Michael on this one. I still like the loser becomes. Again, except for 2020, I think Trump is a sociopath in office.
Well, it's again with Jason with that, whether it be through the primary, ranked choice voting would be really important in this case, right? Even if only within party in the US two-party system. Or it's the party nominates, not the actual, it doesn't have to be the person who ran. Either or, I think, are wonderful protections for all time, not just 2020.
Yeah, agreed. And then Richard asked a question, which I'm going to read in as well. He said, Michael, I'm presuming this question was for Michael. Michael, since the first book came out, has anything you have seen or experienced changed your ideas in any way?
I wish I could say yes, but no, not particularly, other than my takeaway from the first book and all the dialogues about it. And that takeaway was that the job may be the biggest entitlement of them all. So the dialogues have really kind of nudged me along because my idea spurred a better idea or a different idea. I'm sorry, at this point, I'm not writing any more books. So I hope that, folks, again, you have to be my voice in the future. Please do so. Add ideas, change ideas. I'm good with that. If I could be some tiny little spark, it's been a life well lived.
So Michael, we've got another question. This one's from Abhishek. He says, I agree to your point on new technologies assisting humans and not replacing them. However, in developing nations like India, lack of skills is the major problem. What are your thoughts on dealing with that?
Abhishek, my friend, well, I hope you will consider me a friend after I answer your question. India's governance is standing in the way of what could be a juggernaut. So much talent, so much intelligence, so much drive and motivation, so much youth still, relatively speaking. The governance, I'm sorry, I'm changing your question about technologies. Get the governance of India fixed, corrected, what term you ever want to use. And then I don't think I have to answer your question because you're going to have a gazillion other fellow Indians who are going to answer it for you very quickly.
Yeah, I wish I had an informed answer on this, Abhishek. I've thought about India. I've thought about other nations. My wife and I are avid travelers. We love India. You probably know me because you know that I love India. Um, I think about this all the time. I don't know where to begin in countries where there are issues, yes, of governance, but there are also issues of education and economics being not as easy to access for the whole population. And I think that that creates a issue of how do we tackle these problems simultaneously. And I know, for example, there's also a high level of corruption in India as well. Um,
You used the word. I was trying to avoid the word.
yeah, it's sad but true. And you know, my friends in India have been my educators about the level of corruption in India. I don't quite know the answer to your question. I have thought about it. When I have thought about it cogently, and by no means a conclusion, I have thought about different organizations providing scholarships and actively seeking out uh, the passionate Indian youth and making sure that they get a great education. And I keep going back to education almost always when I think about this problem. I wish I had a better answer for you, my friend.
I'm going to try and add a little bit. Now, I'm not saying it's a better answer. My first book had three primary policy chapters: retirement, healthcare, and education. So I did, and people ask me, Michael, if you could do only one, you could fix only one, which one is it? I said education, education, and education. So Jason, not surprised, we're completely aligned. Abhishek, because of online, based upon electricity and access to computers, the amount of skill and education that is going to be available through coursework online, that's going to be a massive lever to pull. Is it going to be enough? I can't say, but yes, this will help develop skills in education. This will help. Online learning, even to the extent of YouTube videos on fixing things. All of this is under the same umbrella of intelligence and skill advancement.
Michael, I'll add something here. Two things, actually. One, when I was at CFA Institute, the one time I was asked what I would do with the massive surplus that CFA Institute generated every year relative to its operating budget, I said that the people in nations that have their exam fees ought to subsidize those in nations where they have not. And in India, for example, that would look like subsidizing the CFA program to a massive extent so that on a purchasing power parity basis, it costs the average Indian family the same as it would in the United States. That was one that is something that was toyed with internally. I don't think it ever came to fruition. And then on the front that you were just describing, Michael, um, one of the issues that we've been toying with behind the scenes at the Sarasota Institute think tank is with online education being a legitimate source of learning, what is missing is disintermediated accreditation. And what I would anticipate some very thoughtful organization, I've even thought about doing it myself, doing is creating a firm or an organization of leading accreditation institutions where they would have to leave the institution because they have massive conflicts of interest, but they would leave and start a third-party accreditor, and they would allow you to self-design your own educational path based on online learning. And that degree would be as valued as, say, an education from any middle or upper level university globally, so that we can begin to rectify this problem. That also allows you to honor your passion.
And
Richard's got a
I
question.
wrote about that study real quick. I wrote about that in this book, that until and unless we get acceptance and accreditation on that work, it can't launch the way that it needs to. And you know, the reason why it's not coming is because the colleges, you don't even want to get me going on the evil that some of the colleges have thrust upon all of us. Study, you have a question, go.
Yeah, I find it interesting to reflect on a lot of what you've written in the books, sitting where I sit in Norway. Um, Basically, I hit the jackpot when I decided to move here 20 years ago. And this
But
is
you
more
won't
of an
let the rest
observation.
in.
Well, you know, we have a lot of what you talk about here as a given.
Yeah.
It is there, you know, healthcare, education, and we have a multi-party political system. There are balance and checks all over the place. And yet we still see issues surrounding things like education. You reach a certain point of looking at your children and the education they're getting and a certain lack of hunger, perhaps. You're looking at them getting a decent level of education, but wondering whether they're being pushed hard enough, or wondering whether there's more you could do, whether actually exposure to a little bit of discomfort would be more beneficial than the comfort that they're growing up in.
Richard.
Just wondered about your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so Stoddy, he brought me up to Oslo a few years ago to talk about my first book. And, you know, they're all nodding, yeah, we got this, yeah, we got this, yeah, we got this. And I'm like, how do I agitate this group to have a good dialogue? You just nailed it. You have created safety nets and platforms to such a wonderful extent, and really wonderful, I'm not being sarcastic, that it has hurt your trampoline. Remember, I used these three pieces. Your trampoline has been weakened because of the strength of your nets, safety nets, and your platform. And human motivation being what it is, we can deride it, dislike it, or just accept. We have generally a drive for more, something, and it doesn't have to be money, but a drive for something more. And that is the insidious little thing that is a challenge for Norway. And I talked about that more in the first book than the second book. But think of it this way. What we know, whether you are a student or you are an athlete, stress, in the neuroscience, it's called Berlin's, not as in the city, it's spelled differently, Berlin's hill. Think of a little hill, and as you're moving up the hill, stress, 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 stress. There's an optimal point of stress. It's at the peak of the hill. Stress actually helps to make you stronger, make you smarter, to drive you. With no stress, you will never produce the same way. This is why capitalism, or I'm going to come back to the beginning, it is the best system. It needs some modifications and rules and you know, guardrails. Maybe different than in the US, but also maybe different than some of the massive guardrails in other places. Capitalism is the right system to be managed for society's good. I hope that helps.
So,
Thank you.
yeah, we're right at the top of the hour. I've got one sort of closing thing that I wanted to share, but I want Michael to have the last word today, since today is Gravitational Attractor Point is his book and his work. And I think for me, as a citizen first, finance pro second, these are the conversations I wish were taking place more widely. My closing statement is, I remember being in graduate business school, and a friend of mine who was more conservative than me on the political spectrum said, Jason, all your beliefs that I hear you talk are conservative, so why are your politics more liberal? And I said, because I'm a capitalist, which of course got him to thinking, how is that possible? And I said, capitalism is designed to create winners and losers if it's functioning correctly. And I don't believe morally of leaving the losers behind. Now, loser by definition is somebody who chose to compete. And if you have a system of ever greater competition, you are going to create losers. And from a moral point of view, I don't believe in leaving those folks behind. So that's why I'm a capitalist. That's my last word. Michael.
Yeah, the big learning I had in my first book was so many just don't have a shot. They don't have a chance. They are losers before they ever actually had a chance. I'm okay with winners and losers. And you know what the research seems to indicate? People are okay with winners or losers if it was a fair game, if the rules were followed, and if losing doesn't mean you can't keep the lights on, you can't feed yourself or your children. Uh, we need to have winners or losers, but the losers shouldn't be punished, right? Platforms and safety nets, we can do this. This is possible. This is not fantasy. This is not a, wow, some people ask me, Michael, really? And I say, yeah, really. I have a son. Many of you may have children or wish to have children. How can you not engage in these dialogues? How can you not want things to be better? And from a capitalist standpoint, if we can unlock the billions of people around the world who don't have enough food or electricity, and if we can unlock that intelligence, wow, is the future going to be amazing. We have the potential to do all this really, really well. When we start to acknowledge it's not about us, it's about everybody. Equality, opportunity, opportunity, equality, say it any way you wish, for everyone. Safety nets, platforms, and trampolines. We can do this. And I say we, because it's going to take a we, and I'm going to continue to pound, well, I can't really pound, the proverbial table as long as I can. But my friends, be my voice, carry it forward.
Michael, thank you. Last thing, where can people get a copy of Get to Work on Our Future?
Same place everybody gets everything, Amazon.
Of course.
Yeah, both. The books are on Amazon. So please go get them and share the ideas. Tell more people to buy the damn book. Proceeds are going, not to me, they're going to charity.
Thank you for joining us, everyone. Thank you for the comments, the active dialogue. You all have social media networks. That's how you discovered us. Share this widely if you like this episode. We're on YouTube from the Research Chair. Subscribe to that sucker. Spread the good news. We're trying our best to help the industry and people. Next episode is 2 weeks from today. It's the 15th of October, same time, noon Eastern time. That's 11 in Michael's slightly forgotten time zone. And we'll see you in 2 weeks. Thanks for joining.
Bye, all.